Hello, friends. It's been about 4 months since India found the first case on January 30th, and it's been the second lockdown has been completed, and now we are in the third lockdown. So let's look at what India is doing and what more can be done, and what things can be done in a slightly different way, so that we reach all the cases and reach the peak as quickly as possible and start either plateauing it or start to decreasing the number of cases and therefore reach completely corona-free India. So let's look at this figure. It's a thing in which it's the graph which shows that the number of increase of the number of tests every day to the number of active cases and the number of deaths and also the recovery. And so we can see that proportionately, as the number of tests are going on increasing, so is the average rate of increase of the cases, which is around 7% increase, and so is the increase in the death rate, which is also nearly about 7% on a daily basis. Now, if you look at the graph of India, of the total number of tests, confirmed tests, cases, and deaths, we find that the number of cumulative tests is going on increasing as at quite a rapid rate now. Since 24th of April, it seems like India has started doing adding sufficient number of tests on a daily basis. And we see that the number of the cases, the confirmed cases, is also increasing, but it's not very remarkable increase, but it's still increasing. But the death rate, thankfully, it's not getting too much high. So if you look at the condition in April 24th, we find that the total number of tests at that time was 541,789, and the total confirmed cases was 23,077, and the positivity rate was 4.2. On May the 1st, we find the positivity rate is 3, and the tests has been 902,654 and 35,043 total confirmed cases. And we found on May 8th, the cumulative total number of the cases was 1.44 million, and total confirmed cases was 56,342. That means the number of cases is increasing almost proportionately to that of the cumulative test. But let's look into further in a table that what's happening since 24th of April to 8th of May. Now here we find that the tests have been increasing almost at a 7% every day. And so India has been adding almost every day 7% new tests from the previous figure. So every day we see that there is an increase in the number of tests. So at the same time, we are finding that the total number of the cases is also increasing at a rate of 7%. So we find that the rate of increase of the tests is sort of proportional to the number of, or the total number of the cases found is proportional to the number of the tests. But we find that the margin remains exactly the same, 7% to 7%. And when we look at the positivity rate, we find that over the last 15 days or so, the positivity rate has remained stagnant at 4%. So let's look at what it. So over the past 15 days, the tests done is increasing at a rate of 7% every day. We find that the daily positive case finding is also increasing at a rate of 7%, almost 7%, the same rate as that of the increase in the number of the tests. And we find the positivity rate remaining constant at 4%. So what does it indicate? It's very interesting that you increase the number of the tests by 7%, you have almost exactly the same percentage increase in the case finding, but your positivity rate remains the same. It has not changed over the last 15 days. So the interpretation could be that keeping the positivity rate at a constant of 4%, let's say the positivity rate doesn't change at all, it remains 4%. If we increase the tests by 100%, so there is a possibility that we might find the confirmed positive cases increase by also 100%. The other possibility is if we increase the positivity rate, if we double the positivity rate, let's say from 4% at present over the last 15 days or so, or even more, that 4% has been almost like a constant figure. If we increase it to 8%, then even if we increase the number of the tests by 50%, the case finding will increase by 100%. So there's a very interesting correlation here between the number of the tests increase every day and the total number of the case finding every day, whereas the positivity rate remains exactly the same. Let us look at what can it be, why it is like that. It's a very interesting figure, but why it is like that. So it appears that the infection seems to have reached a constant pool in some given community or a geographical pocket, with a constant rate of infection transmission in such community or geographical pockets. So, which means like the infection seems to have pooled in, to have actually moved into some sort of an pockets or communities, and it is actually circulating at a constant rate. So it is something like a jar filled with, some colored balls, and you're taking out the red balls at a constant rate. By every time you're putting your hand down, you're taking out a certain number of the red balls out of the box, out of the jar, but somebody is adding almost equally the same number to the jar. And so the overall, the pool seems to remain constant. Now, it is likely the tests are being done in a generalized approach where the representation of such high-risk community or geographical pockets are forming a steady percentage of the total of the tested population, which means like the tests that India is doing is always having a certain percentage from that population in which the circulation is going on at a constant rate, or the infection has formed a constant pool. The percentage of such people or such population remains almost the same in percentage terms of the total number of people one is testing. So let's say if you test 100 people, let's say there will be X number of people who come from that targeted or that specific population. So every time you do the test, maybe you increase the test to 200, but the percentage wise increase in the number of X, that means people from that given population remains the same. So proportionately, your test number increases, let's say by 7%, as we have seen, but also the case finding increases by 7% because you have increased your cases testing, increased the population in which you are testing, but that increase of the population has again engulfed proportionately that community which is pooling that infection. Alternatively, but I think it's less likely, that the rate of infection in the general population has reached a steady level. That means even if you are able to try and find out the number of the cases, the rate of transmission of infection has reached such a constant level that even if you increase the number of the test, your test results, if your positivity rate remains the same, will keep on identifying proportionately equivalent to the increase in the number of tests, which means that the population, in the general population also, the pool of infection is has reached a stagnant level, which means the number of the people being identified and the number of the new infected ones is almost the same. So that is why your increase in the test is almost equivalent proportionately to the percentage increase of case finding. But the third point is less likely, because I don't believe that it is the general population which is having the constant pool of infection. I believe that probably the numbers indicate that it's probably in certain given groups or communities where this infection might actually be pooling and moving around and having a constant. So what could be the inference? The possibility is why within that certain population, or geographical area, or pool, or a group that is happening. It's possibly because of the practice fatigue, something called as a practice fatigue, like repeating the same thing again and again and again over a long period of time. Though it is not a very long period of time, it's many other infectious diseases that has taken much more longer time to really get controlled. But this is affecting the very basic general population's lifestyle, and so maybe some groups have reached a sort of a practice fatigue, and therefore to do the preventive practice with the same vigor any further, maybe it's becoming difficult for them. The second is a compulsion driven. Maybe some communities and some pockets is finding that it's now very difficult for them to remain within the bounds of such certain restrictions and follow the preventive measures so strictly, because there are many other aspects of life which they would like to now address, because just giving to practicing the preventive measures may not be really uh, a choice to them anymore. So now the issue is that what can be done to increase the case finding, and what strategy one has to actually look into that will help in finding the more cases, because it's already been 4 months since the first case and second month since the first lockdown. So we find that to do the keeping the previous aspects in mind, that is practice fatigue and compulsion factors, we I would like to mention here that we need to undertake a study at this point of time and to see that what is causing those issues. The second is, without a revisit to the guidelines, I mean, this is high time now that we have to revisit the guidelines and look into the strategy of management of COVID-19, including the case finding, aspects and definitions, and also the communication strategies, to see that if there is any need for change, or are they really working or not. Then also we have to look into a potential new approach, completely probably a new approach. I'm not saying that we have to rewrite or we have to develop a completely a new approach, but maybe rewriting it or remodulating it, including the messaging and the administrative aspects, would be a very, very important thing to do, because then it will actually reduce the testing, wasteful testing, I should say, and then also missing the target populations where the infection might be thriving. So what can be done? One is that the first and most important, a rapid assessment or a study has to be undertaken at this point of time to see the efficacy and the effects of the strategy so far. The second, very important, is to identify the high-risk target groups. Now, we have been doing a lot of, hotspots and associated with the hotspots, the contacts and other people around and things like those. But I think that is not really going to help us. Of course, the hotspots can be one of those strategies, but we have to identify the high-risk groups at this point of time, because now we have sufficient evidence, data, and experience to identify where the potential pool of infection can be actually moving around. Once we do that, we, instead of doing sort of hotspot and associated hotspots like contacts and all testing, what we need to do is targeted mass testing. We can do the targeted mass testing only once we have identified the high-risk groups. So this is a very important strategy, and many countries has been doing it with a lot of success in it. And then we have to develop or redesign the COVID-19 India strategy. I think this is also of paramount importance. So I repeat again, at this point of time, a rapid assessment or a study needs to be undertaken to see the efficacy and effects of the strategy so far. We have to identify the high-risk target groups. We have to undertake a targeted mass testing, not the one we have to change the strategy of testing from the present to targeted mass testing, and we have to develop or redesign the COVID-19 strategy. Thank you so much, and hope that if one actually follows these, probably we'll be able to get much more better results in future. Hope everything comes to an end very quickly. Thank you so much.